Gaming can be an expensive hobby, more so with the recent hike in the price of AAA releases and the rising prices of related console hardware. As such, gamers would rather spend their hard-earned money on nothing but the best of what the medium has to offer, which can be unfortunate for games that don't hit that level of quality. We're talking about games that are considered average or less than average by critical standards, and we've found that many of these titles have something to adore that makes them worth checking out. You wouldn't be picking up these games at launch, but experiencing them becomes a much easier pill to swallow when you can get them at a fraction of the retail price. To that end, we run down 10 not-so-great games that deserve a second chance should you happen to come across them during a sale. Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 was arguably one of the most highly anticipated games of the last decade, but all that anticipation and excitement didn't amount to much when the game finally launched in 2020 after a ton of delays and pushbacks. Cyberpunk 2077 was rife with game-breaking bugs and glitches, and the performance on 8th generation consoles was absolutely horrendous, making it all an unplayable mess. Many of the previously promised features, like a live service multiplayer component, wall running, vehicle customization, and more, were also absent from the final release. But underneath that thick veneer of technical inefficiencies and broken promises, there lies a great depiction of a dystopian future, complete with a complex net of gameplay mechanics that's definitely worth more than a look. And now that post-launch updates have cleared out these rough edges, Cyberpunk 2077 is definitely worth checking out. Biomutant. Much like Cyberpunk we discussed before, Experiment 101's Biomutant endured a turbulent development cycle, complete with delays and pushbacks, but unfortunately there was little light to be found at the end of that very long tunnel. Biomutant launched to unfavorable reviews on account of its shallow open-world mechanics and weak story, and while all of that is definitely true, that does not make Experiment 101's debut title a bad game. It's a decently fun time, but what makes it worth a second shot is the inherently charming art style of Biomutant and the beauty of the post-apocalyptic environments that you get to explore during the adventure. Saints Row. Developer Volition tried to reinvigorate interest within the Saints Row franchise with a new reboot last year, and while the new game did certainly look promising at first, that experiment ended up failing miserably. Saints Row received unfavorable reviews at launch, which led to disappointing sales, and that's a shame because Saints Row can be a pretty fun time if you go in with the right expectations. Sure, the story might not be all that engaging, but the open world has plenty of varied content available for players to choose from. The mission design might not win any awards, but the game does a good job of constantly amping up the chaos with new tricks that will keep you playing for hours on end. Fallout 76. Fallout 76 sought to take the franchise to new heights with its live service nature, but missed the mark by a significant margin. The game was released in 2018 and quickly became one of the biggest disappointments of the year, and a lot of that can be blamed on its barren world, which was devoid of anything interesting, and the litany of bugs and glitches that were present during launch. However, Bethesda has put in the work and turned the game around on its head with multiple major content updates. And Fallout 76 has now become one of the best ways to experience what the franchise has to offer. If you're one of those who haven't checked out the game for a long time, give it another try. You might be surprised. Rage 2. The original Rage was a promising yet underrated release, and Rage 2 sought to alleviate those criticisms and build a successful sequel on those strong foundations. It received plenty of favorable reviews, but that didn't amount to much, as the sequel managed to sell just a fraction of the original during its opening week, and that's a shame because Rage 2 is, by all means, a flawed but enjoyable experience. It might falter in terms of its open-world design, but the moment-to-moment gameplay of juggling between abilities and taking down groups of thugs remains a consistently enjoyable experience through and through. Many fans have warmed up to this release following its launch, and there's a good chance you might find something worth liking here as well. Days Gone. Days Gone is hailed as one of the weakest PS4 exclusives, and for good reason. Sony Ben's post-apocalyptic adventure was not the most polished game when it came out, and the game suffered from a bunch of other design issues that resulted in a rather tepid critical reception. But if you try to look past those cracks, Days Gone is a fairly good post-apocalyptic game with plenty of merits to its name as well. The Freaker Hordes mechanics are kept hostage for a majority of the game's runtime, but they are easily one of the best parts of the game. Cruising around the world on your motorcycle is also a pretty fun time, and upgrading it to your own needs makes for an engaging experience that's worth your time. Gotham Knights. There's little doubt that Warner Bros. Games fumbled with Gotham Knights. The game looked like a promising co-op action-adventure that had the potential to be something truly great, but what we got at the end felt like a faint shadow of those lofty promises. It's definitely not up to snuff as a $70 AAA release, but it might not be as bad if you manage to cop it during a sale. The open world and loot-based progression are some of the weaker aspects of the game, but the Arkham-inspired combat loop makes for a fun moment-to-moment experience. Each of the 4 characters control differently from one another, and jumping in with friends and figuring out the best character synergies can make for a fun time. Resident Evil 3 Remake. Resident Evil 3 Remake is generally considered to be an underwhelming game, and a lot of that could be attributed to the fact that the Resident Evil 3 Remake was an incredibly short game with little in the name of replayability, especially when compared to the RE2 Remake that came out just a year prior. Putting down $60 for a game that essentially lasts 6 hours can be a tough pill to swallow, but if you get the same experience for a fraction of the price, Resident Evil 3 Remake starts to sound like a pretty tantalizing deal. Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Ghost Recon Breakpoint released in 2019 to an average critical reception, and the game was quickly dismissed as yet another Ubisoft open world complete with all the trappings that one would expect from that moniker. And while a lot of it stands true to this day, we can't discount the fact that Breakpoint can make for a really fun open world romp, especially if you go in with your friends. The missions might be cut from the same cloth, but you do have plenty of options when it comes to how you go about it all, and developing your character with new and powerful equipment also remains a pretty engaging experience. Mass Effect Andromeda. Developer BioWare's Mass Effect trilogy is a masterclass in storytelling and bombastic RPG gameplay, and its follow-up, Mass Effect Andromeda, was poised to fill some pretty big shoes. And when the game was finally released in 2017, it failed to win over the hearts of fans, and a lot of that can be blamed on the game's broken technical state at launch. But now that most of these issues have been ironed out, you can better appreciate the merits of this game, including, but not limited to, the much better combat loop on offer. It's definitely not representative of the best of Mass Effect, but it is certainly worth a second look. That's all for now. If you enjoy what you saw, please hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, now is a great time to subscribe. We upload brand new videos every single day. After subscribing, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time, right here on Gaming Bolt.